Torrance Boosie Hatch has been in gun charges for a 2023 arrest in San Diego, according to court records. Now, he was arrested back in June 2023 on a felon in possession of a firearm charges when officers first found 2 handguns in his car during a traffic stop. Now, those charges were dropped. A few weeks later, he was charged again with possession of a gun by a convicted felon and drug user for a separate incident. On Wednesday, Hatch posting on X that he felt blindsided by the indictment while on vacation with his family, claiming it was unfair that the indictment, quote, again on the same charge with another added.
But there's questions about why, if this was a valid charge, should not have been brought initially the first time. And so we'll be raising motions concerning that charge specifically and the government's motivations for bringing the charge so late after Mr. Hatch has exercised his constitutional rights in this case.
So you said he was turning himself in today in San Diego. Is he going to have to be in custody?
He is not turning himself in today. It's next week. So I think that's where I cut out. The government wanted him to self-surrender today. That makes no sense. He was on bond in his state case. He had no violations. He showed up to court. He showed up to court on time every time. He was on bond in his federal case. Federal case Hatch won. For over a year, no violations. He showed up to court every single time. There were no issues whatsoever. Issuance of an arrest warrant in those circumstances, something I personally have never seen. As you know, I was a federal prosecutor for a long time before I started doing defense work. That is not something that I had seen as a prosecutor. It's not something I've seen as a defense attorney. Uncalled for in this situation. We moved to recall the arrest warrant. We moved his appearance date, not a self-surrender date, an appearance date next week. So next week, August 2nd, Mr. Hatch will appear in court, not surrendering himself as the prosecution wanted him to do. You know, their request for an arrest warrant in this case, in my opinion, there is no justification for it. He is not in questions. And you have jurisdictions across the country that have ruled that the law as applied to people like Mr. Hatch is unconstitutional. With the backdrop of the Ninth Circuit having already made that specific finding, and you decide to recharge him now, that makes no sense. The statute of limitations in the federal system is 5 years. What that means is the government has 5 years from the time that Mr. Hatch is alleged to have engaged in criminal conduct to file criminal charges against him. Mr. Hatch is arraigned next week.
Yeah. And you said the charges are, it's felon in possession of a firearm. That was the previous charge, or unlawful possession of a firearm. You said there was a second charge in the new case.
There is. So they charged Mr. Hatch with possessing a firearm while being an unlawful user or addict of a controlled substance.
Oh,
I'd like to
charge.
Right. So just as the backdrop on this, we know that Mr. Hatch was under supervision for over a year, federal supervision. One of the conditions of Mr. Hatch's federal supervision is that he was subject to regular drug testing. There have been 0 violations. They know this. They charged an individual who for the last year following his original arrest in this case, was regularly tested for narcotics by pretrial services, and at no point during any of those tests did Mr. Hatch test dirty. So for you to be charged with this, you've got to be an addict. An addict means someone who, can't control their drug use. You've got to be a user, someone who is actively using while you're possessing the gun. Assuming that charge in itself is even constitutional, there's significant questions about the constitutionality of that statute anyway. But even if it is constitutional, and even if it is constitutional as applied to Mr. Hatch, look at the facts of the case.
I mean, was there any thought that Duarte would gut that charge? Because we haven't heard that in relation to the Hunter Biden case. And is that the exact charge he was charged with and convicted of in Delaware?
It was. So Hunter Biden was charged with that same charge. It is one that is very infrequently brought. I've been practicing in federal courts for over 20 years. I've had one case prior to this where that count was alleged, and the count ultimately was dismissed.
Federal investigators reopened up a case against Boosie. You see, Boosie got the news while he was with his family. It was in shock. Boosie was on a celebration marathon, traveling the world, because the case got dismissed. Now, Boosie find himself in a tough spot. You see, things that you do eventually catch up. It might not catch up in the way of that situation, but believe me, things come back around full circle. This seemed like one of those situations where Boosie is in hot water because of his reputation. You see, Boosie said he was going on a celebration world tour. And guess what transpired? Them people say, you ain't gonna rub this in our face. And all it takes is for one department to feel played. And they gonna research and come up with everything that they know that you did to take your ass and remind you that they could have got you and that they do got you. Now, Boosie's name has been subject to a whole lot of shit. Boosie has been Mr. Invincible since the death row situation back in the day with Marlo Mike. Now, Boosie is older, more wiser, more laid back, want to enjoy the life and enjoy the fruits of what he have made, but not so fast. These people on his ass. Salute.